This is the final video for Unit 5, Causes of the Civil War, and in this video you will analyze the last events leading to the war, and you will also predict the impact of war on both sides. So make sure and open to your notes section, take good notes, and as usual see me with any questions or if you need any clarification. The Dred Scott decision really fired up the North, really made the Northerners realize how unfair the situation was between the North and the South when the Supreme Court said basically that slavery was allowed in all territories. And this is where really kind of the final countdown to the Civil War is going to begin. And there's going to be few more events that are really going to lead directly into the fighting of the Civil War. And that's what we're going to take a look at. First event we're going to look at is known as the Lincoln-Douglas debates in 1858. Here's a young Abraham Lincoln, and this is a man by the name of Stephen Douglas. And they're both going to be running for president, and they're going to have some debates. They're going to discuss and argue with each other certain key issues. And the main impact of the Lincoln-Douglas debates is that Abraham Lincoln really becomes well known after these debates. He had been kind of a minor character before this, but after the debates, people started to really know who he was. Lincoln argued that the main issue was the spread of slavery in the West. He argued for the equality of African Americans. And he became well known throughout the country. And we've seen this before, a short quote from his famous House Divided speech in 1858. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. And this is where he's saying that one way or the other, this issue of slavery, states' rights, tariff, fanaticism, the differences between the North and the South will eventually come to a close, one way or the other. The next event, October 1859, John Brown's Raid. John Brown attacks a federal arsenal in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, with about 20 men. Remember, a federal arsenal means that it's controlled by the federal government, and not a state government, not a small arsenal. It was a federal arsenal. And Brown and 20 men attack this arsenal in Harper's Ferry, which is not very far from where you are right now. He had hoped to start a slave rebellion in the South. Slaves, in fear of punishment, did not join. Brown was captured and convicted of treason and murder. He was hanged. So, by certainly the Southern perspective, John Brown would have been considered a traitor, committed treason. But for some Northern abolitionists, he would have been seen as a hero. He was a hero to many abolitionists, but Lincoln said he went too far. Fearing more attacks, the South said, "We are convinced the safety of the South lies only outside the present Union. The sooner we get out of the Union, the better." And remember, when they say the Union, they're talking about the United States. So the South here is really starting to contemplate leaving the United States and forming their own country. In November 1860, Abraham Lincoln is elected as President of the United States. Here's kind of a neat picture of Abraham Lincoln when he's young. Okay, this is a little bit tricky, so again, if you're not sure, please see me for clarification. The Northern and Southern Democrats could not agree on a single candidate, so their votes were divided between two candidates. So maybe you'll remember that uh, presidents are elected from political parties. Today we have the Democrats and the Republicans. Now remember, Democrats and Republicans were very different in the 1800s than they are today. Lincoln is a Republican, and he was supported by the Republicans, and he was the only one supported by the Republicans. But the Democrats had two candidates. So some of the Democratic vote went to one candidate, and some went to another. And it made it much more difficult for them to try and defeat Lincoln, who was supported 100% by the Republicans. In addition, there was another candidate for president for the newly created Constitutional Union Party. So now you have votes partially for this Constitutional Union Party. You have some votes for one of the Democratic representatives and some for another Democratic candidate, but all the Republicans are supporting Lincoln. The Republican Party was unified behind Lincoln. So even though Lincoln didn't campaign in the South, he still became the next president. This is super important. Lincoln didn't need to try to get the Southern vote because all of the Republicans supported him, and he knew that everyone else running for president were divided. The votes were divided up amongst other candidates. So he didn't even need to go to the South to campaign. And this further showed the South that they were losing national political power. Because of the Lincoln election, finally in December 1860, South Carolina secedes from the Union. They formally state that they are no longer part of the United States. Lincoln said he would not change slavery in the South, but that slavery could not expand. In reaction to Lincoln's election, South Carolina secedes. That means they formally declare they are no longer part of the United States or the Union. Soon after that, the Confederate States of America, the Confederacy, also known as the CSA, is created, and their constitution allows the owning of slaves. So now we have, according to the South, two countries, the United States of America and the Confederate States of America. But it's important to remember that according to the North, there weren't two countries, there was just the United States of America and the rebels. A man by the name of Jefferson Davis is elected the president of the Confederate States of America. Now, this issue of federal territory in the South arises. And this is where we come to Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter was in the South, but it was a federal fort, meaning that the North believed that Fort Sumter was part of their territory. But the South said, it's not part of your territory. You're in the South. You're in the Confederate States of America. And that's going to lead to conflict. Again, Lincoln promised not to end slavery where it existed, but he would not allow the South to secede. In 1861, Confederate troops attacked the federal outpost in Charleston, South Carolina. Again, the Confederates believe that Fort Sumter is in their territory, so they try to take it over. And the Northerners say, no, that's a federal fort. You can't mess with it. And this is where the first shots of the Civil War are fired. And Lincoln goes on to write, the last ray of hope for preserving the Union has expired at the assault upon Fort Sumter. So these were the final moments before the war. And the next video and the beginning of the final unit of this course, which is the Civil War, will cover the actual battles and the daily lives of soldiers in the Civil War. Again, if you have any questions at all, if you're unclear on anything, please see me as soon as possible.